Okay, well, Sam, can you tell us any more about what life was like in Haworth in the 30s and 40s? Maybe talk a little bit about some of the businesses in town.
Yeah, I sure can. One of the businesses was Milton White's feed store, and Milton White will always be remembered as a fellow that, if you saw him, he had on a pair of striped bib overalls and smoked a corncob pipe. And he was also the janitor at the old original Methodist church down the street. And I can just picture him in my mind today, walking down there puffing on that cob pipe, going to work into church. Another one was the George brothers, Chris George, and I don't recall his brother's first name, but they had corn shellers and threshing machines.
Was it Bill? Chris and Bill? Or was Bill his son?
No, Bill, I think maybe you might be right. I kind of think it was Bill. And they had the threshing machines, and in earlier days it had steam engines, and then the last years that they did the threshing and corn shelling with those machines, they had, I think they were called Rumley oil pull. They were not a steam engine, but they looked like it, big high-wheeled tractors.
So did they go out and do the threshing out on the farms then?
Yes, they'd go out and thrash. They'd shock the oats, and I got in on that as a kid. I would drive the wagon. It wasn't big enough to toss the shocks, but they cut them up with a binder which automatically tied them in little bundles or shocks. Then you drove the horses would pull a wagon, and it had sides on it so it wouldn't fall off. And all your neighbors were together doing this work, and they'd take pitchforks and pitch those bales up on there. And I was big enough that I drove the horses, but I don't think I really controlled the horses like I thought I did. I think the horses knew where they were going, and you said get up and whoa, and that took care of that. But anyway, then you hauled it into the threshing machine, and it made a straw pile. It threshed the grain out of it, and then the straw pile, and you used that for bedding for your livestock. And then the corn shellers, they pulled the corn sheller up next to the corn crib, and they were designed so you could open up the doors, the sides of the corn crib, and then mostly it was the old men. The kids didn't do too much of that during the war. It was mostly, to me it was an old man. It's not in this day and age.
Right.
If they were 65 years old, well, they were old, and they would get up with these corn rakes and rake the corn out, and it would have a conveyor that took it into the sheller, and then it put the cobs in a cob pile. Well, usually the cobs were, the cob pile would be burnt where the straw was used, but we always, before they burned it, we had a cob house. And you would catch a wagon load of those cobs and put it in the cob house, and that was to start the fire in the furnace and the cook stove. And then after it got warmed up, and as a child, that was part of the kid's job to make doggone sure the water bucket was filled that night, and that the cobs and the coal were and you didn't have to be told to do it. You know, along with your other chores, you were taught that you did it. They didn't ask you if you did it or not.
Yeah.
They knew you did.
That's right.
Let's see. Another thing on about Haworth and on Main Street was the old telephone office. And if you wanted to make a toll call, why, you could go in there, and they had a pay phone, and you put the coins in it. And the chief operator was Nellie Simpkins. Now, the people in later years remember Merle Simpkins, and it was the grandmother of
Gary Simpkins.
Of Gary. It was his grandmother, and she was a well-respected, and she also went to our church, so we knew her. And the night operator was a lady named, she was a single lady, never married, named Ethelene Huffman. And she was the night operator, but she was afraid to stay by herself, so her mother had to go down there, and they had cots, because some nights there was no calls, but if somebody had an emergency, they had to have someone there to connect to the fire department or what have you. And that's some of the The other thing was the old Farm Bureau station was at the intersection where Freedom is now. And I'd worked for Claude Hancock. Well, as I said earlier, after I got noticed I was going to go to the Army, Lois and I got married, and I went to town and worked. When I came home, I went to work at Caterpillar, which was a good company, but I was on the night shift, and I'd been gone from home 2 Thanksgivings, 2 Christmases, and Lois was going to have a baby, our first child, and I thought, this isn't for me. So Claude, I was working for him, I had for years off and on in high school, and he said he bought the old Farm Bureau station, and I wanted to because they shut Caterpillar down for 2 weeks for vacation, and I had very little vacation money coming. And he said, if you want to tear down that old station, I'm going to build a new one there, and you can manage that if you want to. Well, it sounded good to me, so I took my vacation time and tore down the old station, and it still didn't have running water in it. They had a pump, so we filled that with gravel, and got the station tore down, and then I had an opportunity to go to work for GTE, the telephone company, and so I went there because Claude hadn't got ready to start building the other building or anything, and the telephone company gave us good job security then. So I went to work with them, and
What was your first job with them?
I was a construction lineman. And I went on the GI Bill. I took mine, instead of going to college with it, I served a 4-year apprenticeship. And that's when you climb poles 8 hours a day and strung wire and put up cross arms and dial telephones from just coming through, getting famous then. And we had all these little towns. We started out at Nyack, and I don't remember, we ended up at, we went to Manier and Towanda and just all over these little towns, putting up new wire and setting poles and converting them. I did that, and then I ended up in Bloomington, and I was a resident telephone man at ISU at the university for 6 years. And then I had an opportunity to go into management, and I was over the fellows on the street besides the ones that took my job at ISU.
I'll be.
And so I feel I had a very successful and very happy career, 34 years and 4 months with GTE, and got a nice retirement package, and so I'm very thankful for it.
You've had a wonderful life.
I have.
Absolutely.
Been very blessed, and one of my proudest things is my family. I don't think I could ask for a nicer family, and they're all close, and they're already planning the vacation with all 4 of our children and their spouses and grandchildren, and Lois and I. They're talking about that Lois and I are supposed to go with them, and we're going to go to Hawaii next year.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
And
so, what's the one thing that you'd like for people to remember about you down the road?
Well, that I cared about people, and my mother always told me, if you lose your sense of humor, you lost everything. And I think most people that know me, I have maybe at times I get carried away with my sense of humor.
Oh, I don't think
know,
so.
But anyway, I've had a very blessed life. I couldn't ask for a better wife and children.
That's wonderful. Anything else you'd like to say?
No, that I'm proud to say that I'm from Haworth, even though I was absent. The 7 years that Clinton was my address, 2 of those years, Lois was in Clinton and I was in Japan.
Right, right.
But Haworth is a great place to raise a family.
It still is today.
I'm proud of the school district. I'm proud of the churches, and I'm back home.
That's wonderful. And thank you for this interview.
Well, thank you. It was my privilege.
All right.